If I was a non-citizen of the United States, could I come and buy a gun in the United States as a non-citizen somewhere? Is that possible, Daniel?
It's incredibly easy, unfortunately, the way our gun laws are written at the federal level and in many state levels. We give dangerous people a pass and basically allow them to bypass the criminal background system and purchase guns from private sellers in most places with no records, no background checks, no questions asked.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome yet again to another edition of What Really Matters NYC with your host Tony Keevan, and more importantly you. We have the number on the screen. I think you can call, but we've got a guest on the line right now, and that clip you just saw, and also we've got our commentator Lorraine as well on the line. And that clip you just saw was from early December, and it was an interview I did about, it was called Can Al-Qaeda Kill Us With Our Own Guns? And you know, this gun issue has really been bothering me, and I know it's been bothering the mayor as well, because he came out yesterday and he gave a big talk about stop and frisk, which of course the purpose of that was to get guns off the street, etc. And I thought that I'd kind of put a little dose of reality on this and have a special guest. I'm going to call him Tim. That's not his real name, and he's a protected source for a kind of a journalist point of view. But this gentleman, he basically, well, Tim, are you there?
Yes, sir.
So, Tim, tell us a little bit about what you did, because and why it pertains to this topic with regards to a gun.
Well, to begin with, I am not in the age of majority in any state of the United States. I'm under 18, and I built several AR-15s simply using the internet. At no point did I have to undergo any type of check with any type of authority.
And how did you build this weapon? Maybe we could put it up on the screen if we get a second here. So tell us, is it all legal what you did?
Yes, surprisingly it actually is, because if you're not prohibited from owning a firearm, which almost no one who isn't a felon or is a legal resident is, then you're allowed to build it on your own without a check, because obviously you can't regulate simple building parts like aluminum or just the barrel or just a bolt.
So how did you do this? I don't want to give away tips to bad people, but did you buy it all in one place, or did you go to different places to buy it, or how did that work?
I only bought it from the parts from several different vendors just to get a better deal on everything, but you could buy entire rifle kits. Some vendors have them where every single part except the lower receiver is sold. It's only like $600, and then you need to find your own lower receiver. You combine the two sets, and you have a working rifle.
So, did you undergo any background checks or anything when you did this? I guess that's the loophole in the law that lets you do that. Is that correct?
Correct. No background check.
So, do you feel responsible enough to do that?
Well, I know myself, and I definitely am responsible enough, and it's not a very straightforward process. You need to have an understanding of drilling and knowing how to use a mill or a drill press. So chances are a 12-year-old isn't going to accidentally do this. You have to be very knowledgeable. You have to do a little bit of research, and it has to be your intent to do something like this. And any well-disciplined person will follow through. It should only take a few hours of machining work.
So how do you feel, generally speaking, about, because you're a teenager, how do you feel about this capability of being able to buy the parts and build a gun without background checks, given Newtown, for example? I mean, high schools. I mean, you're you know, this environment is just so full of fear.
Mm-hmm. Well, parts have to be replaced on the gun. It's just like a car engine. The bolt has to be replaced. The barrel has to be replaced. Charging handle might have to be replaced. If you want to change something out, you should be allowed to change something out if it's only like a $20 part without having to go through a background check for every single part. And some items are just way too common. For example, springs are all over inside the part of the firearm. We can't possibly start having background checks for springs. They're completely regular chrome silicon springs. The only part that you would need a background check for is the lower receiver, but you can manufacture that on your own. That's the part that requires the machining. You need to buy a block of aluminum and only make that on your own using a couple of drill bits.
So in essence, are you saying that background checks don't really make any sense anyway because people can build all their own pieces?
Well, they make sense because a lot of people would be too lazy to do this. I mean, if you look at the statistics, a lot of people who were either felons or had some other history were stopped from buying weapons when they went to pick up their firearms through a federal firearms licensee. And, I mean, any of them could have built a firearm, but they just didn't want to take the long way. Most people just prefer the way you go to the shop and you just pick it up.
So, as a young person, what do you think of your elected officials for not passing the background check, which seemed that I think 90% of Americans wanted that?
Well, the 90% statistic, they didn't ask Americans whether or not they wanted to pass that specific bill. The question was phrased more like, do you support the warm, fuzzy, good idea of background checks, which 90% of people said yes to. 90% of people didn't support the specific enforcement that the bill would have implemented. And the background checks, only law-abiding people will conduct a background check. If I was a criminal, I could just sell anything I made to anybody else without doing a background check. So just because a piece of paper in Washington says I have to do something, a criminal will obviously not follow through on those requirements.
I see. So someone like you can manufacture weapons and go ahead and sell them anyway without conducting the background check. It would sort of make it a black market, sort of like drugs, rather than legalizing drugs.
Absolutely.
I
see. I'm absolutely certain that there's manufacturers doing this in the South and trading them to Mexican cartels or other parts of the world. It's just too easy.
So, Lorraine, do you have any questions? Lorraine?
How many of these does he have?
Did you hear that?
Not very clearly.
She asked, how many of these do you have?
Well, at this point, I've made 3 lower receivers, 2 of which I have built up fully. I could buy all the parts that would fill in the 3rd receiver with a credit card, have them shipped overnight wherever, and every single part would come to my door, and I could just build a 3rd one, no problem. I mean, I don't have an interest in just stockpiling them for no reason.
So what's the solution? Because, you know, our police, the NYPD in particular, I mean, and police all over the country, they have to deal with crazy people who have guns. And, you know, that puts them at risk. So if the background check, you're saying the background check law would have helped somewhat, right?
Yeah, somewhat. It definitely wouldn't have hurt.
So what do you think else that we can do to help protect, you know, police as they work to protect us?
Well, I would love to help police as much as possible, and I just want to say that this presumed safe utopian environment where we can do some type of political action that will make us significantly safer, and it's this, or the answer is so simple, is just fantasy, because there's always going to be danger. At the end of the day, you can't expect to be safe when you go somewhere. You have to ensure your own responsibility by either concealed carrying a firearm, obviously within the laws of wherever you're going to be doing that, or just accept the risk, and that risk is universal in life.
Wow, you're awfully young to be so cynical and cold on the truth, my friend. I guess that's sort of what 9/11 did to you, I suppose.
I mean, there isn't some type of just utopia where you can just relax and let your guard down. The world's full of predators, and you have to always take proactive measurements against those predators. They're definitely not going away anytime soon.
Okay. Do you have any last words of advice for us to help control this situation? I guess you're for the background check. It will help somewhat. I understand people will always be able to make their own guns, and bad guys can always resell them to whoever they want, and probably there's manufacturers who do that as well. So there's always be holes in that things can fall through, cracks stuff can fall through. But is there some sort of overall philosophy or education or training or some sort of something that you would recommend, you know, from your view as a young person, that this is your environment now in the new world as you grow up, that you would hope for, that could help to stabilize the situation so that these arms don't wind up in bad people's hands?
I would recommend getting rid of gun-free zones. I don't think it'll make some overwhelmingly traumatic difference, but it will at least give victims a chance to fight back instead of the current advice, which is pretty much just close your eyes and hope it ends before you die. Some type of preventative defense needs to be allowed to the people who, well, let's be honest, predators want to go to places where they're not going to have much of a challenge. eliminate those opportunities. That way there will be challenges everywhere they go. And there's people who try to commit shootings all the time that get stopped by a concealed carrier, and it just never makes the news. Nobody believes in the power of the individual, but there's been many, many cases where a single individual manned up, drew his handgun, and was able to stop a situation before it happened and before we ever heard about it.
So are you for having armed guards in schools?
I would prefer responsible armed teachers, because it's a statistical guarantee that many teachers are already licensed concealed handgun carriers of their state, and they would probably gladly carry on the school if they could, because it would only make it safer. And they would probably voluntarily take on this job. I know many teachers who would do so. And in addition, the not having their identities be public is better, because then a shooter doesn't know who could be the one to stop them.
Wow.
And if this person's name was public, then there'd be some hyper-liberal parents who would want like extra background checks on him. They'd want to know everything about his life. I mean, they would dig into his records, maybe find some type of like weird sexual desire or whatever, and try to get as much dirt on him as possible, and the whole system just wouldn't work. So some degree of privacy needs to be instituted.
Okay, well, I'm calling you Tim just because that's an easy name to call you. I want to thank you very much for your time. You've really given a good wrap around this whole subject for us, and that we all grown-ups seem to struggle with. Lorraine, do you have any parting question or comment?
Well, I did want to ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Did you get that? Yeah.
Yes, I did. I'm actually going to probably work for the federal government.
Well, congratulations. We need smart people in the federal government, believe me. So please stick with your goal, all right? It would really help us a lot.
I mean, I do believe in the original Founding Fathers' idea of legislation through democratic participation, and I feel it's the most effective way to try and get some type of involvement or make a difference or whatever happens through the executive policies of the whichever agency I'll join, to just hopefully try to direct legislation in the most helpful way possible.
Okay. Well, listen, we really appreciate your time, okay, and your insights and your knowledge that you shared with us about how easy it is to build an automatic weapon off the internet.
Oh, just for note, the weapons I built weren't automatic, but I could make them automatic if I wanted to.
Okay, well, great. So it's not. So it's semi-automatic?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time, all right? Appreciate it.
All right. Likewise. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to spread some knowledge.
Take care.